We live in serious times, and we need to know what time it is.
You are listening to the Revolutionary Radio, African Eyes Radio.
In the Bible, in the 3rd chapter of the book of Ecclesiastes, it says there's a time for everything under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted. A time to come and a time to go. A time to rend and a time to sow. What time is it, black man? What time is it, black woman?
We live in dangerous times.
We cry for peace.
Leboa, Lingala, Tumbuka, Kiswahili, help us identify the issues in Africa. Internalize our surroundings. Break down what is holding us back in Africa as we look forward in progress. It is 2 o'clock on the dot. I am Thando Macozoma. This is On African Time. Welcome, one and all, to all the listeners out there. You are now locked into Africanized Radio, and we are on African Time with your host, doing the most, Thando Macozoma. I promise to always give you more, and I will never give you less. Nonetheless, we always have to start off our show with the greatest of success. Now, on today's subject, I would like us to focus on a sensitive matter which has been going on for longer than I could ever remember: bullying. What is bullying to you? Does bullying only apply to your adolescence, or does it continue because of the change in this new age world? And what can we do to prevent these future actions? We'll be having a 3-part segment where I'll be telling you stories of situations that happen. Some are good, some are bad, some are ugly. As well, we're going to have audio segments of interviews, people helping us to understand more of bullying, not only at school, but at home, even at the workplace, surprisingly. But we'll have that and a lot more coming up. But before we do, we'd like your views and reviews on the subject matter today. So our WhatsApp number is 079-089-3671. Don't forget to follow us on our Facebook page, which is Africanized Media. As well, we're on Instagram, so please follow us and we'll follow you back in love. The handle is African_eyes_media in small caps. If you follow us, we'll follow you back with love. Today, it seems like it's going to be one of those heart-wrenching subjects that we need to open up about. So if you with your friends and family, bring them together. If you're with your colleagues, sit them down, let them know that we are on air, and don't forget, you are still tuned into African Eyes Radio. We are on African Time, and you are still with your host, doing the most, Thando Macozoma. We'll be back in a few.
You are listening to the Revolutionary Radio, African Eyes Radio.
Identify, internalize, progress.
If you want truth, we are that truth. Come rain or shine, you will find what you're looking for. We are the custodians of truth, the surgeons that bring light out from the darkness. You want the revolution? We are the revolution.
The Revolutionary. Welcome back to the show, and if you're just joining us, then you are in luck. You are still tuned into African Eyes Radio, and we are on African Time with your host, doing the most, Thando Macozoma. So I wanted to focus on this sensitive discussion right now. We are talking about being bullied. You know, sometimes we don't understand how things are going on in a person's mind. They say back in the day that being bullied was somewhat of a rite of passage, where you had to sum up the courage to stand up for yourself, because not all the time you will be protected by the ones you love, and you have to grow a backbone. But it has become so severe in this day and age, we don't know if it is measured as a good thing or a bad thing. And does it only apply to children? Because right now it seems even so severe that all over the world, from the workplace, even the internet has become so vast. So this is what we're going to be focusing on, bullying. And later on in our segments, we're also going to have audio interviews with people like Steve Mabona, a Gauteng Educational Department representative, explaining concept of cyberbullying and bullying as a whole in the foundation phase between, school and high school, and how it's affecting a lot of people. And as well, there'll also be a clinical psychologist named Jerry Bayer to also give us more in-depth information to understand a broader understanding of what's going on. And as well, later on, we'll have a second audio clip which explains more of the workplace bullying, the behaviors, the toxic behaviors at the work environment, which will be discussed more by Mr. Brian Mhlanga. So before that, I wanted to just touch on a subject which I thought would be another coming of age story from trials. Identify, internalize, progress.
If you want truth, we are that truth. Come rain or shine, you'll find what you're looking for. We are the custodians of truth. The surgeons that bring light out from the darkness. You want a revolution? We are the revolution.
The revolutionary. From trials to tribulations. So this young man's name is Eli Zanzimani. And Zanzimani Eli, if I'm saying it correctly, is a 23-year-old man who was born in 1999 in Tanzania in a rural village away from a lot of people, because they lived in abject poverty. So now let me give you a backstory of what's going on. Before Eli was born, his mother was married to a man, Eli's father, mind you. So now she had multiple miscarriages, I think about 4, and always prayed to God for a child, even if the child was to be disabled. And then when Eli was born, he became the miracle child in his mother's eyes. The doctors always told her that she would have to be physically fit, because then right now she gave birth to an athlete. So mind you, the whole story behind it is that he had deficiencies on his face, or that's what they said. He looked deformed. They compared him to a baboon or a primate, so the people in his society always looked at him differently. So growing up, they lived in abject poverty. Sometimes it was even hard for Eli's mom to find 3 square meals a day, let alone just a meal at night. So you need to understand, this young man, they said his thought process was slow. We don't dispute that. But now, you know that whole concept when they say people fear what they don't understand, destroy what they cannot conquer. This is just the theory of man. Sometimes we do act as monsters, was the thing that occurred in my point of view. Because now, most of the times, if not being bullied and mocked, he was beaten unnecessarily. So this young man adapted to a lifestyle whereby he only had interactions with his mother. If not his mother, he would keep to himself. And now the young kids around him in his community would always want to approach him, mock him, treat him like a dummy or a toy. He would always run away from them or any personal interaction because he felt threatened. And they said he would run about 60 kilometers sometimes in a day. His mom was so physically fit, sometimes she'd always have to look for him, because then, he'd wander off just to have some tranquility, because sometimes having the troubles of the world is what I feel he didn't need, and it was unnecessary. But even at those times when he had to come home, I think while he was still in the living situation with his father also used to just shun him away, treat him like an animal. That's why he mostly adapted to only having one person in his life, and as well, nature. So sometimes, you could get fruits and berries, but most of the times the community would always find him whenever his mother's searching for him, eating leaves. And they said he was behaving like a baboon or a monkey, not understanding who he is. later on in life, fast forwarding to the current events, a news team came to meet the family, and then from there on out, the mother explained his story of how his son was always ill-treated and he would never find a way to defend himself. If she wasn't there to defend him, then it mostly ended off dire. So that's why he would always keep to himself. More often than not, the interview was conducted and the news team left Mr. Eli and his mother, not knowing that they would ever come back. They created a GoFundMe page and spread the story about Zanzimani Eli, which went viral all over the world. And now this young man, going from a monkey without any friends, just wanting to connect with people, now had millions of fans. The GoFundMe account went hectically up. Helping later on in life, the news team came to surprise Eli and his mother, and they even built a house in his name. But mind you, it was all the doing of this young man's story and how he tried to persevere in life with the little he had. Not knowing what the world was to him, he became more familiar with the people around him and became more interactive with people that were kind to him. So you see, people, kindness is not always a weakness. It's always a form of strength. To show goodwill to someone, it will come back to you and it will be known as karma. I find it beautiful, you know. After that, if we fast forward, this young man was overwhelmed when he found the new home that was built in his name with that GoFundMe account, because of his story facing adversity, and his mom was overwhelmed, but she still had one wish, that his son could still be a part of society, because she felt, you know what, one part of the struggle is halfway done. Now the second one is just to ensure that my son can socially interact with other people, because then it wasn't actually being savage. It was a defense mechanism of how he was treated in that particular place. Going now later on, the GoFundMe account actually helped the young man, and his story kept on blooming further and further, and people wanted to know more about him. Now he's never even been in a car. He was traveling, trying to experience how it is being in a motor vehicle. Now he went from ragged up clothes to swagged out suits on his first day to school. A special school for people who are a bit slow but not retarded. Now mind you, he showed the world that you don't have to be cruel to be kind. You just need a little understanding, a little respect, a little patience with a person. You know, sometimes looking at the exterior of someone, judging them is a problem. Because you know that old saying, don't ever judge a book by its cover, because you never know. Today a person might be down, tomorrow they'll rise up. That's what happened to Zanzimana Eli. And I felt like, wow, he's an inspiration for all, because then it also brought awareness to people who had disabilities. And from there on out, ongoing right now, even as we speak, he's still in school. But then the later on updates keep saying that, you know what, he's not that backwards as medical doctors actually assumed he would be. And they said it would be useless for him to even go to school. They just didn't exercise that patience with the young man. They didn't look deeper. They didn't focus harder on their patients. They just gave a clinical answer, which was general, which is understandable. Sometimes you're only human, but making assumptions sometimes does not help. Because I feel like the inner spirit of a person is stronger than anything. It can take on any bounds. This young man is now still living in a well-conditioned home. He's in school and he's doing better for himself, and he's still going viral. He still has fans around the world that want to meet him, that want to know him. He has countless interviews, and people want to show his story about trial and tribulation. And this is just one of those young factors that explain the whole concept of bullying, you know? Being mocked and bullied and misunderstood. Now that same community that were mocking, or the few certain people that were ill-treating this young man, are now appreciating him. Because then I think it also brought awareness to the conditions of how people are living there. So now it gave opportunity for other people just to come in. And the more they keep coming in to see Mr. Zanzimani, the more they also see how the community is suffering abject poverty. And now it brings awareness on how to make job creations, or makes entrepreneurs want to come in and lend a hand. Oh, what's that word? It's not entrepreneurs. What is it called? Those people who are rich and they like assisting other people who are less privileged. Ah, a philanthropist. Yes, that's the word I was looking for to the listeners out there. You know, sometimes things come in a bit slow for me too. So it doesn't mean I'm a bit bored. It's just that sometimes, you know, we have so many things running through our minds that we don't have the capacity to speak the same way our thoughts move. It's like zoom. But hey, that's what I'm saying. This is one of those, I feel, success stories from trials to tribulation. It went about love, pain, but now look, adversity is coming in and it's still in progress. It hasn't stopped. I would love you guys to still go into that story about Zanzimani Ali, you know? Explaining about his life, you know, maybe that could be that motivation that you need. You know, check him out on YouTube, find out the story. They call him the boy who was considered a monkey but now is famous as a star. But it's just saying an ordinary person, I feel, was misunderstood and now just needed the right people to set him in place, and now he has that care and love that he needed from the society to help him grow. He had already the backing of his number one fan, his mother. He just needed the rest of the world to see what he is capable of. Now you could see that young man, he's so suaved out. I'm so impressed by him. You know, I'm also motivated to do better. And not only by myself, but by looking at other circumstances out there. And, you know, these are life lessons that teach us. But it also makes you think, look, these are those success stories, but sometimes it doesn't always go that way, ladies and gentlemen, the listeners at home. You know, there's also that other story that impacted us hard when it came to bullying. I'm sure you are aware about it. The one in Toyando, it was in 2021, if I'm not mistaken, about Lufuno. The young lady who had a prosperous future in grade 10 and committed suicide just because she was violated by her own friend. That was the worst thing. That was the he-say of what's going on. An argument that happened between two students, and apparently they were friends. And one person said something to the other, and it was misunderstood, and it escalated from speech impediment to violence. For me, that was heartbreaking. To even find out it was a friend. And then the worst thing about it, the classmates, you know, they're not there to break things up. They're there to amplify the person, the aggressor at times, and just make them feel otherwise. And for me, that even hurts, because when you think about it as well, everyone's daily life, you know, you have to understand where they come from. But as well, you also think, hey, I could have done something. But in this day and age, when you see someone being fought with or ill-treated, you always want to tend to stop things, but you have to be cautious about it. I'm not saying it in a bad way, but to the listeners at home, understand, I've been in a lot of fights. Not saying I'm promoting violence. I mean trying to, you know, delegate and stop things. And sometimes they don't always end up for the good. Sometimes, you know, you can square off with people and say, stop it, be the middle ground, the neutral friend where both sides respect you and you respect them back, so they listen to you in kind. But there are still people out there who are unruling. People whereby you hear stories in the street whereby a fight comes in, and mostly when you try to be the good Samaritan and break things up, you end up being the collateral damage in the whole scenario. I'm sure we've heard of this. This has been going on from parties to interactions with people, just over something so petty that could end off in a person's death. And you wonder to yourself, was it really worth it? Did you really have to go to the extent to prove something to everyone else? And then I always felt like sometimes it's maybe not the angle that we are looking for or we want to hear, but it is what it is. I can't really blame sometimes the person inflicting, because maybe they're also being inflicted. But that for me is a 50-50 segment. We can never know exactly what is the root cause for someone to behave the way they do. Some others feel that, you know what, maybe if they are at home, they're being ill-treated by a guardian, a sibling who's older and they have more power and control over them. It makes them feel helpless. So now they don't want to have that powerless in them. So that powerlessness in them, so they want to inflict it on other people. They feel if they don't have control of their own lives or just somewhat feel safe, they inflict it on others, but it's not always the case with some people. There are others who are aware of what they're doing and they just do it to feel more powerful over a person. Or maybe some would say it's envy of what they think they have. Because, sometimes people look at perception and think, that person right there has something I want. And since I can't obtain it, a skill or whatever achievement they've made, I'm going to make them suffer. I'm going to mock them. I'm going to make their lives a living. Yeah. Listeners out there, I know a few of us have gone through these things. Some have stood up for each other and some have just, say, I'm enough. When your back's against the ropes and then you're like, you know what? If I don't stand up for myself, this won't stop. And sometimes when you do stand up for yourself, the person stops. And funny enough, there are even instances where that same person who's bullying you could actually even end up being your friend, admiring you and respecting you. And then now they open up to their trials and tribulations or just be more civil with you and end all the tyranny that they were bringing upon your life. So for me, it's surprising. But like I said, we spoke about the trials and tribulations of one person, but now the ending of others. The young lady was sensitive, and we'll never know what actually concurred that reached up to that. But then the thing is, I hated was, they promoted the whole thing of anti-bullying. But now, how will that bring a person back? This young lady was traumatized by her friends. And the same person who was considered a friend, who initiated the whole fight, did it for we don't know what purposes. We'll never know. It was between the both of them. We just know that it escalated to an extent whereby now she couldn't take it anymore. So you need to understand, I don't think this was just a one-time thing. Everyone has their boiling point. You don't just overnight think of something to do and you do it. It becomes ongoing, reoccurring. But now, if you don't notice the build-up, by the time things happen, it's too late. I feel like, my opinion, that she was bullied countless times. Maybe not by the friend, but I think the friend was the last straw who just nailed the head to the coffin, Maybe she was mocked, maybe she was ill-treated by her friends or people around her, but it just came to a point where she couldn't deal with it anymore. And if you can't even talk to a person to say, you know what, I'm enough, I think I want to end it, then you have a problem. There are those moments where you just need to sit down and say, hey, I can't take it anymore. You need to vent. You need to find a channel to vent. And if you can't vent, go outside, be with nature, scream, talk, scream in a pillow, do something, but just don't keep it bottled up, because sometimes when you make rash decisions, it's the whole world that tends to regret it. Because now I'm just looking at the situation of this young lady. She decided to end her life, and I am sorry about that. But now the people that have to suffer the most are her family. They will miss her smile, they'll miss her atmosphere, they'll miss her love, and we'll never know. Maybe she could have been something great for tomorrow, but now we lost a star from the heavens because of minor issues or something that could have been just settled if someone just identified the problem or stopped or just said, you know what, wait, enough is enough, or just listened. We can't always say everyone out there is to blame, but sometimes that's why I'm also pleading to anyone listening to this, you have to also come into yourself. If you can't really talk to anyone, talk to yourself. Go to the mirror, look at yourself, try to meditate. If not, take a pillow, scream, do something, walk around, just breathe. Before you do anything, I honestly request to all the listeners out there, if you were to reach a point in your life where you're like, I can't take it anymore, I want you to sit down in a quiet place, close your eyes, count from 1 to 10 slowly with your eyes closed, and try to regain your composure. Because then sometimes just having a clear mind will help. If you can't, just by any means, don't do what you're thinking of doing and ending your life, because you don't know, you could actually be a blessing to someone tomorrow, and you cutting yourself off today. And don't forget, you are not alone. You might be an individual as a person, but you are connected. You have a family, and that family is extended to everyone else in you. You are part of them and they are part of you. Even your own friends are your family. Don't ever forget that. When you leave this world, let it be on conditions that you wanted, but not of what you were pressured into doing because you had no other choice and you thought this was the only way out. Wow, for me, I'm sorry, I was doing a little bit of self-reflecting right there because it tends to hit the soul. But I just wanted us to hit up a little segment as we spoke of, explaining more about the anti-bullying campaign that's going on. And you know what? I think this would be right that we hear a little on this interview with Steve Mabona, who is the Gauteng Educational Department representative, and a clinical psychologist, Jerry Biner, who's going to give us more in-depth understanding of the psyche of how people work in bullying. So we're going to have this and a lot more. So I just thought, let us go straight into it and hear what they have to say.
Schools in the Western Cape have seen an increase in violent, verbal, and cyberbullying incidents recently. A new campaign by the Provincial Education Department is trying to drive home the message that bystanders who film incidents also count as bullies. Speakers shared their personal experience of bullying.
I've experienced cyberbullying. It all started when I won the competition. People would judge me based on my appearance or based on how I choose to live my life. At first, I shrugged it off. I knew it would come, But the bigger I became, the more hate I received. And I thought I could handle it, but honestly, I actually couldn't handle it. And you would think that it's easy, but it's actually not. And I think I probably cried more during that time than I did in my entire life.
When you see two people having a bit of a rumble, there was an instance where I decided I needed to step in and I needed to, I had to say, look here guys, just calm down. These are two big people. I was afraid that I was going to land in somebody's pocket. And what I did was I managed to separate these people. And can I tell you what my peers did to me? You're wasty. Why do you do that, brother? Why must you do that? It's entertainment. It's break time.
And people would look and laugh and she's wearing glasses and make fun of me because I'd go like this with my eyes because they're falling down my nose. That's also bullying.
Pupils at Mitchell's Plains Beacon High Secondary pledged to raise their voices instead of their phones if they witness any form of bullying.
When the National Department of Education decided to say, let's have a framework on safety in all our schools, because bullying is not isolated. You have a challenge of consumption, abuse of drugs in our schooling. That's our first point of departure, to say utilization of these drugs, consequently they will lead into assaults, bullying, all other abuse that will fall on there. So we've been on an upward spiral, if one might put it that way, since 2013, 14, 15, and 2016. Because of these campaigns, because of us interacting with our learners, making sure that we also infuse it in the curriculum, just to sensitize parents that what role that they need to play, what is it that they need to do. Because if one says I'm bullied at school, as a parent, maybe we might say, no, it's fine, you'll be fine. Or the other parent will be saying, no, if you are assaulted, assault back. You don't do such things. So you need to know that it's to the detriment of your child and other children at school. Because if you say go hit back and they go, it will be fighting and will take them through the disciplinary process, all those things. What we call your safety measure policy, which we implement in the entire schooling environment. The school knows what to do on how to implement that policy. All other representatives in the schooling environment are there, forming a committee from a principal, educator, RCL. You have your SGB. SGB play a major role in our schooling environment because they are responsible for governance. So they need to make sure that if a child is found to be bullying, they must be taken through the necessary disciplinary process, and the parent must be called to say, come, this is what your child is doing, or this is what your children is experienced at school, so that you then remedy it.
Bullying comes in numerous forms. So obviously physical, like you mentioned, and psychological and verbal. So psychological will be your things like gossiping, talking behind people's backs, sort of forming cliques and then excluding people. So there's multiple ways of doing it. But the key factor to think about bullying is how the bully comes about. When we learn that, then we can start to figure it out. So I'll give you some examples. So firstly, role modeling. So a lot of children are modeling their fathers, seeing how they perhaps treating their wives. They see there's abuse at home and they think, oh, this is how you're supposed to treat people, and then they carry it out at school. There's often powerless children who are getting abused at home. They feel powerless, so they try and regain their power when they go to school. Forgotten children who feel neglected at home. There's a lack of love. What happens, they go to school, they start resenting happier children, and then they start to take their frustrations. Entitled children who just think they can do as they please. But the key thing to remember, that children who bully are still children. The fact is they're still impressionable children. And I always say, a child who steals, a child who hurts, is a distressed child. So we still have to deal with that child. Because the more you ostracize that child, the worse it gets, not the better it gets. So we still have to deal with both. In terms of victim, typical warning signs, physical complaints, sort of gastrointestinal problems, headaches, migraines, nightmares, coming home a lot with torn clothes and bruises, because then you know, oh, there's regular incidences at school. Loss of energy, plummeting academic results, so going from sort of 60s to 30s, that type of thing. So not being able to concentrate in class, social withdrawal, school refusal is common. So waking up, I refuse to go to school. And now when this happens regularly, then you know there's a red flag. And then ultimately, unfortunately, suicidal thoughts. And as far as teens go, 9.5% of teen deaths are often related to bullying. So this is a big problem. Well, funnily enough, similar factors in terms of acting out, but in terms of what you'll notice in the bully, so regular fights, sort of conduct problems like vandalism, stealing, hurting other kids, hurting animals, conning, truancy at home, so running away a lot from home, seeing who your child is who their friends are. So in other words, seeing who's influencing your child. Also academics plummeting, regular complaints from teachers and the school to say, you know, that they have discipline problems. So those are some examples. This is why parents and schools have to have a stronger relationship. There's often a distance. This is why in bullying, it's a multifaceted approach, not just for the school.
Going back to bullying, I mean, if a parent is called to come to school, and the first thing that most parents do, they are on a defensive mode. So parents need to be cautious when they are called to school to say, these are the things that your child is doing. Don't want to start by defending. Listen to what the complaints are, and the school will be in a position to say, these are the incidents that we are experiencing. And now, if they come to an extent of being reported, then it means there's something wrong that is happening. So as a parent, then you need to, be accommodative and see on how do we assist your child to repair. When National introduced this framework, they identified cyberbullying already. Because remember, there was Mixit. Mixit was in fashion, and each and every child was exposed to a phone at that time, and that's where the abuse was happening, and where you go to an extent of, children, they were exposed to an extent that they will be picked up by, these pedophiles or, these nasty characters that are in our communities. So it has been identified a long time ago. It's just that now you have a new element of social media. It must take action against those that are, making sure that they expose, learners into the things.
I'd probably first to say some people feel better about their lives, think, oh, my life's not so bad. People like to see what's going on in the world and what happens on Facebook. Let me give you an example to illustrate this. You think your life's bad, but then you'll see other things happening, and then you'll start to compare. And what Facebook does is it feeds into your self-esteem, and especially if you're susceptible to low self-esteem. So say you're now viewing this and you see someone else's life is bad, oh, suddenly my life is not so bad. The opposite can happen, where you're scrolling down Facebook and you see someone's on holiday somewhere, or they've just won an award, and then it starts to impact your self-esteem. And these are the dangers of it, because you don't know what goes on behind closed doors. And this is the danger of it. It's not real communication or really knowing. So these are some of the dangers.
Did you hear that? Yo, to the listeners out there, that was an intense insight of what bullying is doing to us in our day and age. And it's scary. You saw all the elements. You know, there was a part there in the audio that made me think about, I don't know if most people remember this one, a student, a privileged child, came to a his primary school, with a samurai sword, and then started slashing students and I think teachers alike. And he ended up going to prison, or well, they said a psychiatric facility, because now they said he was diagnosed with, I don't know, schizophrenia. The story, I really didn't conclude in following it, but this for me was just one of those examples when you think to yourself, you know, we spoke of trial and tribulations, we spoke about sorrow, and then now we speak about children who are neglected, children who feel entitled and think they're untouchable, doing the most horrific things that ever come to mind. It is so heartbreaking and heart-wrenching. But ladies and gentlemen, we are digressing a little much. I'd like us to take a little ad break, but before we do, I want to hear your views, your reviews on the subject of today, which is bullying. So please hit us up on our WhatsApp line, which is 079-089-3671. Don't forget to follow us on our Facebook page, which is Africanized Media. As well, we're on Instagram, which is African_eyes_media in small caps. If you follow us, we will follow you back in love. I don't want you to go anywhere. This is still getting hotter and it's getting more profusely stronger, and we'll have more coming up on our next segment, which is following through about bullying, but on a different sector of its own. It's also now affecting the adults, the parents, the people who are working. And you only thought it was one-sided. Now we're flipping the other side of the script. Do not go anywhere. We'll be back and it will still be hot. And don't forget, you are still locked into Africanized Radio, and we are on African Time with your host, doing the most, Thando Macozoma.
You are listening to the Revolutionary Radio, African Eyes Radio.
Identify. Internalize. Progress.
If you want truth, we are that truth. Come rain or shine, you'll find what you're looking for. We are the custodians of truth. The surgeons that bring light out from the darkness. You want the revolution? We are the revolution. This is
the Revolutionary. Welcome back to the show, and if you're just joining us, where have you been? You are still locked into Africanized Radio, and we are on African Time with your host, doing the most, Thando Macozoma. Now, ladies and gentlemen, back to the show where we're discussing bullying. Earlier on in our segment, we were focusing on how people are treated in high school, cyberbullying, and so forth. But now I also want to digress and, transcend. We are sending through the whole conversation at large. Also, toxic behaviors at work is now considered bullying. But how far is far? Is it come to an extent where now it is considered abuse? I don't know. I just wanted to break everything down because, we've been going towards each other back and forth trying to figure out what is the whole shape in mind. So let me just break it down for everyone. Bullying is when a person physically or emotionally is cruel to another, especially if the person is weaker or has less power. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. For me, I think that sums it up to whatever we were discussing in a whole. You give me something, I give you something back to think about. But then when is it enough to say, you know what, stop? We can't take this anymore. We need to keep on pushing and avoiding this whole matter of condoning ourselves or every debacle or argument we have leading to violence. Now, I have the final segment where I discussed we are going to be listening to Brian Mhlanga, who will be explaining further about the more toxic side of working with someone in the office who has more authority or power over you, and now they're inflicting you with nothing but psychological problems ongoing on forth, and now you don't know how to get out. Because if now you were to report your senior and say that he or she is sexually harassing me or is giving me psychological stress when they are pounding me with a lot of work or just doing something that is improper and not even allowed in the work field, will it jeopardize my chances of getting it better, such as promotions or being appointed to something that could be even more beneficial for the company, knowing that I am well qualified, but now because there's animosity amongst us, I'm shunned aside. I'm not qualified. I'm no more that person that they were looking for as a backup to say, you know what, throughout everything and even in this presentation, Thando can do 1, 2, 3, 4, but now I did something and I reported myself or I reported my senior for sexually harassing me. Now we have trust issues. So, you know what, without any holding back, without any thoughts in progress, you know what, I just want us to dwell on this one as well. It is bullying nonetheless at the end of the day, but it's a different segment for you to understand. You know what, it's not only our children who suffer this, not the adolescents, but also us very well adults are going through the same trauma. We just need to know how to handle it. So before we can do that, let's identify what is the problem at the workplace. So without any further ado, please listen to what this person has to say.
There isn't a particular environment that is rife for bullying. I think for bullying to take place, all you need is to have specific people or groups of people who are targeting individuals or even a group of people. And this could be in the form of spiteful comments, offensive remarks. It could be direct intimidation. And sometimes it is overt, and sometimes it's not overt. So it's very difficult to pinpoint it unless you really have the eye for it. Then you can pick it up. But it's very difficult to pick up bullying. Look, it's a form of abuse, and like with all abuse, the abuser usually probably has credibility within the community or within the organization. So sometimes when you come out and you say, I've been abused by Ntabiseng, and everybody then says, really, Ntabiseng, but she's such a good person, or he's such a good person, and people make excuses for Ntabiseng's behaviors and attitudes. And I think what we then encourage people in corporates, both public and even private, is to start keeping a record of that, and at times to even have witnesses who can bear witness to what happened or what did not happen or what was said. So it's very important that in the workspace, people are aware that this is a possibility. It's not something that only affects our children in schools, but it's something that we take into the corporates with us, and it needs to be addressed. The bully knows exactly what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. They know that they're either abusing their power or their position and their role. They know exactly what they're doing. So one cannot plead ignorance. It's like saying the abuser does not know that they're abusing their victim. It's not possible. They really know. It's really targeted. It's really targeted. Okay. So there are two routes that organizations could take. One is the route of looking at it from an employee wellness and well-being perspective. So that has to be taken care of. In that context, there has to be, an organization has to create what we call psychological safety, right? Psychological safety is where employees really have that opportunity to ask those tough questions, to challenge authority, to make mistakes, and to realize that they can be supported. With psychological safety also comes the whole notion of what we call these days in organizational development perceived organizational support. And employees really feel that it's not just talk shop. They really feel that they're supported in all their efforts, they're supported in their work, and they're supported in their initiatives. Once you've got psychological safety, employees are in a position now to be creative and to be productive and to experiment. That's one level from a wellness perspective. The other layer would be to look at it from a legislative perspective, which is the laws. What are the policies within the company around those kind of things, and what steps should one follow when they encounter those kind of things? So we need to have those two-pronged approach when we are dealing with this kind of thing. It's by knowing your rights. Know what your rights are as an employee. Because if you don't know what your rights are as an employee, you find yourself in a very at a disadvantaged position, because then you cannot actually say you've crossed the boundaries. So rights are all about boundaries, and you need to establish the boundaries. And if you cannot establish the boundaries, this is when you can appeal to law. This is when you can appeal also maybe for mediation and intervention from other parties. It could be, if it's in a domestic situation, then one could ask then another person who's in the household actually say, look, I sometimes take my off on a Saturday, but you ask me to stay until 3, and by the time I go, I don't even have time to rest.
Brian Mhlanga giving us an insight of toxicity, must I say bullying in the workplace and how we look at things. I just wanted us to dwell on that whole concept and think, what is the way forward? You know, we've identified the different problems and we've seen that the pattern is one thing that is consistent. One is trying to take power over the other. And now what must we do to stand up? Because now if you let it go for too long, eventually when you become an adult, you might not even have control, and it could even be more fatal than are in your adolescence. My thoughts of the day to you, the listeners at home, that sometimes two wrongs don't make it right, but you have to voice your opinion out. And to the youth out there, if you have a problem lingering, don't keep quiet. Don't internalize it. Sometimes it's good to speak to an adult, to have a friend, just voice your opinion. Be there. You know, remain calm, breathe slow, count from 1 to 10 with your eyes closed and remain with your composure. You know what? Sometimes in life, things don't work the way we do, but we always have to find a way to just come around it. Any challenge that you have doesn't mean it's going to stop. You know, there's that old saying where they say, God will not give you something that you cannot handle. So this is one of those weights you have to bear. And I think you will bear it. And then you will also conquer it, and you'll have your own testimony. Right now, I just want to say the conversation never ends, but unfortunately on my side, it is time for me to go. But before we do, don't forget to still WhatsApp us on our WhatsApp line, because I still want to read your views and still know your comments and hear your voice notes. The number is 079-089-3671. Don't forget to follow us on our Facebook page, which is Africanized Media. As well, we're on Instagram, which is African_eyes_media in small caps. If you follow us, we'll follow you back with love. It's never the right time to go, and it's never the right time to say goodbye. But you know what? I always leave you with that one terminology that now I want to make it famous for everyone to hear and say, Mashallah, we are done. I love you. God bless, and have a good day, good night, or good afternoon. I'll see you same time, same place tomorrow.
Identify. Internalize. Progress. If you want truth, we are the truth. Come rain or shine, you'll find what you're looking for. We are the custodians of truth. The surgeons that bring light out from the darkness. You want a revolution? We are the revolution.
The revolutionary